My boss screamed at me in the client meeting because I corrected his numbers. He didn't realize the client was recording everything for their lawsuit. David Brennan slammed his hand on the conference table so hard the water glasses jumped. His face turned red and he pointed at me like I was something he scraped off his shoe. "Who the hell do you think you are, Alex? Interrupting me in front of our client?" I sat there frozen while Catherine Wolfe from Meridian Industries watched us both. I had just pointed out that David's quarterly projections were off by $1.2 million. Simple math error in the spreadsheet. I thought I was helping. David stood up and leaned across the table toward me. "You're a junior analyst. You don't speak unless I tell you to speak. You don't correct me. Ever. Especially not in front of clients." His voice got louder with each word. Catherine shifted in her seat but said nothing. I tried to explain. "The formula in column E was wrong. I just thought we should present accurate numbers before they sign the renewal." David's eyes went cold. "Get out. You're done here. Pack your desk. You're fired." I looked at Catherine. She was holding her phone flat on the table. The screen was facing up. I could see a recording app running with a timer counting up. She met my eyes for just a second and gave the smallest shake of her head. "Don't react." I stood up and walked out of the conference room. My hands were shaking. Behind me, I heard David apologizing to Catherine. "Sorry about that. New hire. Doesn't understand how things work yet." I went straight to my desk and sat down. Didn't pack anything. Just waited. 20 minutes later, HR called me. Linda from Human Resources asked me to come to her office immediately. I walked down the hall expecting to sign termination papers. Instead, Linda closed the door and sat down across from me with a legal pad. "Tell me exactly what happened in that meeting." I explained everything. The presentation David was giving to Meridian Industries about their account performance, how I noticed the projection error, how I mentioned it quietly, how David exploded. Linda wrote everything down without expression. "Did anyone else witness this?" I told her Catherine Wolfe was sitting right there for all of it. Linda nodded slowly. "Catherine called me directly after the meeting ended. She's filing a formal complaint about David's conduct. She also informed me that Meridian's legal team has been documenting issues with our account management for 6 months. They've been recording all meetings with David as part of their case file." My stomach dropped. "What kind of issues?" Linda looked at me carefully. "Financial discrepancies. Catherine said your correction today confirmed what they've suspected, that David has been inflating performance numbers to justify higher fees. She wanted to make sure you weren't fired for catching his error." I sat back in my chair. David had just screamed at me and fired me, in front of a client who was building a fraud case against the company, and she had the whole thing on tape. Linda explained that Catherine's recording was legal because we were in a one-party consent state. Meridian had been considering a lawsuit for breach of contract and fraud for months. Today's meeting was supposed to be their final review before making a decision. "Catherine told me that watching David scream at you for correcting an obvious error made their decision easy. They're filing the lawsuit on Monday. She sent me a copy of the recording already." Linda turned her computer monitor toward me, played the audio file. David's voice came through crystal clear. My quiet correction about the numbers, his explosion, the threats, his comment afterward about me not understanding how things work. Linda stopped the playback. "That last comment is interesting. It suggests David knows the numbers are wrong and presents them anyway. Catherine's lawyers think it's an admission of intentional fraud." I tried to process this. "So I'm not fired?" Linda shook her head. "You can't be fired for refusing to participate in fraud. That's whistleblower protection. If David tries to terminate you now, it's retaliation. I've already informed the executive team about the situation. They've suspended David pending investigation." I felt dizzy. 2 hours ago, I was a junior analyst trying to do my job. Now I was apparently a whistleblower in a fraud case. I went back to my desk in a daze. My coworker, Rachel, came over immediately. "What the hell happened?" "David came out of that meeting looking like he wanted to kill someone. Then he got called into the executive floor and hasn't come back." I told her everything. Rachel's eyes went wide. "Holy shit. Everyone heard him screaming in there. The conference room walls aren't soundproof. Half the office was talking about it." She sat on the edge of my desk. "Alex, David's been here for 12 years. He manages 8 major accounts. If Catherine's right about the fraud, this is going to blow up the entire department." I hadn't thought about it that way. "What do you mean?" Rachel lowered her voice. "David doesn't just manage Meridian. He handles their reports the same way he handles everyone's. If he's inflating one client's numbers, he's probably doing it to all of them. The company could be liable for millions in fraudulent billing." My phone buzzed. Email from Linda. "Meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with legal counsel and executive leadership. Attendance mandatory." I showed Rachel the email. She whistled low. "You're going to need a lawyer." I didn't have a lawyer. I barely had enough money to cover rent. But Rachel was right. If this was turning into a legal situation, I needed representation. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the meeting in my head. David's face when I pointed out the error. The way he exploded so fast. Catherine's phone on the table recording everything. I'd worked at the company for 7 months. Took the job right out of college because the salary was decent and I needed to start paying student loans. David had seemed demanding but competent during my interview. Professional. I never saw him lose control before today. My roommate knocked on my door around midnight. "You okay? You've been pacing for an hour." I told him what happened. My roommate was in law school. He listened to everything and then sat quiet for a minute. "You corrected him in front of a client and he fired you on the spot. She was recording because they suspected fraud. The company suspended him. Alex, you just became the key witness in what sounds like a major corporate fraud case." He pulled out his phone. "I'm texting my professor who specializes in employment law. You need to talk to someone before that meeting tomorrow." I felt nauseous. This was supposed to be a normal client meeting. I just caught a math error. My roommate shook his head. "You caught fraud. There's a difference. And David's reaction proves he knew exactly what you caught." Professor Elizabeth Navarro called me at 7 in the morning. She spoke fast and direct. "Your roommate explained the situation. I have an opening at 8 a.m. if you can get to my office. You need counsel before you walk into that meeting." I got there at 7:45 a.m. Her office was small and packed with case files. She had me walk through everything again while she took notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is textbook whistleblower retaliation attempt. David fired you for refusing to present false information. The fact that the client was recording gives you ironclad evidence. Most whistleblower cases struggle with proof. You have a recording of your boss admitting he presents numbers he knows are wrong." She pulled out a legal pad. "Here's what's going to happen in your meeting. The company lawyers will try to control the narrative. They'll want to settle this quietly, make David the scapegoat, fire him, pay Meridian whatever they want, and hope this doesn't spread to other clients or trigger regulatory investigation." She looked at me seriously. "But if David was committing fraud for years, the company executives either knew or should have known. That makes them liable too. The lawyers will try to keep you quiet, offer you a severance package with an NDA. Don't sign anything without me reviewing it first." The meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. Conference room on the executive floor I'd never been to before. 3 lawyers sat on one side. The CEO, CFO, and head of HR sat on the other. I sat at the end of the table alone. The lead lawyer introduced himself as Gordon Shaw. "We're here to discuss yesterday's incident and determine next steps. First, I want to assure you that the company takes all allegations of misconduct seriously. David Brennan has been suspended pending investigation." He opened a folder. "We've reviewed the recording provided by Meridian Industries. We've also spoken with Catherine Wolfe. Her description of events matches yours exactly." Gordon looked at me. "We need to understand the full scope of the situation. How many times have you noticed errors in David's client presentations?" I thought about it. "I've only been here 7 months. I've assisted on maybe 20 client reports. I've caught calculation errors in at least half of them. David always told me to adjust my numbers to match his projections." Gordon and the other lawyers exchanged glances. The CFO, Thomas Reeves, spoke up. "You adjusted your numbers to match David's, even when your calculations were different?" I nodded. "He said clients expect growth, that projections should be optimistic. That's how we keep retention rates high." The room went silent for a long moment. Gordon wrote something down. "Did David ever tell you to falsify specific numbers?" I shook my head. "Not falsify. He'd say things were miscalculated, that I needed to use different formulas or assumptions. He'd mark up my spreadsheets and tell me to revise them. I assumed he knew better. He's been doing this for 12 years. One of the other lawyers spoke. "Did you keep any of these marked up spreadsheets? Any emails where David instructed you to change numbers?" I pulled out my phone. I have all my work emails, and backup copies of every report on my personal drive. David made me redo the Meridian projections 3 times last month. I saved all the versions because I was confused about which formulas he wanted me to use. Gordon's expression didn't change, but I saw something shift in his eyes. "We'll need copies of all those files. Every version of every report you worked on. Every email from David about revisions." He slid a document across the table. "This is a preservation notice. You're required to maintain all documents related to this matter. Don't delete anything, don't modify anything. If David or anyone else asks you to destroy files, report it to me immediately." I signed the document. The CEO cleared his throat. "Alex, we appreciate you coming forward about this. The company is committed to integrity and transparency. We'll conduct a thorough investigation." Gordon cut him off. "Alex hasn't come forward about anything. He caught an error and got fired for it. Meridian came forward with fraud allegations and evidence. Let's be clear about what's happening here." He turned to me. "Meridian is filing a lawsuit against this company, and David Brennan personally for breach of contract and fraud. They're claiming they were overbilled by approximately $3 million over 4 years based on inflated performance metrics. Your correction in yesterday's meeting confirmed their suspicions. Their lawyers will likely want to depose you." The CFO looked sick. $3 million from one client? How many clients did David manage?" Gordon didn't answer. He looked at me instead. "Have you been contacted by anyone from Meridian's legal team?" I shook my head. "Just Catherine. She sent me an email this morning thanking me for having the courage to speak up. She said their lawyers would be in touch soon." Gordon wrote something down. "Forward me that email, and forward me every communication you have with Meridian going forward. The company will provide you with legal representation if you're deposed." I thought about what Professor Navarro told me. I've already retained my own counsel, Elizabeth Navarro. She specializes in employment law. The lawyers exchanged looks again. Gordon nodded. That's your right. Smart decision, actually. The meeting ended after an hour. I walked out feeling like I'd just stepped into quicksand. Rachel grabbed me as soon as I got back to my desk. Everyone's talking. David cleaned out his office at 6 a.m. this morning. Security escorted him out. What did they say in the meeting? I couldn't tell her much. They're investigating. David's suspended. Meridian is filing a lawsuit. Rachel pulled me into an empty office. Alex, people are scared. If David was cooking the books for Meridian, what about everyone else? I work on the Foster account. David oversees it. What if my numbers are wrong too? I hadn't thought about that. Did he ever tell you to change your calculations? Rachel nodded slowly. All the time. Said I was being too conservative. That clients pay for growth projections, not doom and gloom. I thought that was just normal account management, selling the upside. She looked pale. Oh my God, I've been helping him commit fraud without knowing it. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. This is Alex. A woman's voice. Alex, this is Jennifer Chen with Meridian's legal team. I'm sorry, I need to use a different name. Let me use Jennifer Cole. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I put her on speaker so Rachel could hear. I'm with a coworker. Is that okay? Jennifer paused. Is your coworker involved in the Meridian account? Rachel nodded, even though Jennifer couldn't see her. I work on Foster Industries, same structure as Meridian. Jennifer's voice got interested. Same account manager? Rachel confirmed. David Brennan. Jennifer was quiet for a second. Can you both meet with me today? We met Jennifer at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with a briefcase full of documents. She ordered tea and got straight to business. Meridian has been suspicious of billing discrepancies for 18 months. Catherine noticed that projections in quarterly reports never matched actual performance. Always optimistic, always wrong, always justifying increased fees. She pulled out a spreadsheet. We hired a forensic accountant to review 4 years of reports, found systematic inflation of growth metrics, market analysis, and performance projections, all prepared by David Brennan and his team. Jennifer looked at me. Your correction yesterday gave us the smoking gun. David's reaction proves he knew the numbers were wrong. His comment about you not understanding how things work suggests intentional deception rather than incompetence. She turned to Rachel. If he used the same methodology for Foster Industries, they have grounds for a lawsuit too. And if there are other clients, this becomes a pattern of fraud that could trigger criminal investigation. Rachel's hands were shaking. I didn't know. He told me that's how account management works, that we sell optimism. Jennifer softened. You were following your supervisor's instructions. That's different from knowing participation in fraud. But we need your testimony about how David operated. The instructions he gave, the changes he demanded. Rachel looked at me. I nodded. She turned back to Jennifer. What do you need? Jennifer pulled out a legal pad. Everything. Every email where David told you to revise numbers. Every meeting where he explained his methodology. Every report you produced before and after his edits. We're building a case that shows systematic intentional fraud across multiple clients over multiple years. She clicked her pen. Alex, Catherine told me David fired you in that meeting. Has the company reinstated you? I explained about the suspension and the investigation. Jennifer made notes. That's constructive discharge, firing you for refusing to participate in fraud. Even if they technically suspended the termination, the damage is done. You'll have trouble working under David if he comes back. The hostile environment claim writes itself. She looked up. You should consider filing a complaint with the State Labor Board, and possibly the SEC if this involves securities fraud. My head was spinning. SEC? Jennifer nodded. If your company is publicly traded, or if any of these clients are, inflated projections could constitute securities fraud, material misrepresentation to investors. That brings federal charges. Rachel put her head in her hands. This is so much bigger than I thought. Jennifer closed her notebook. This is what happens when fraud goes unchecked for years. It metastasizes. But that's not your fault. You were junior employees following orders. I went home that night and found Professor Navarro's card, called her cell. She answered on the second ring. I told her about the meeting with Jennifer and what she'd said about the SEC and securities fraud. Professor Navarro was quiet for a minute. This just became a federal case. Securities fraud carries serious prison time. If David was inflating projections that clients used to make investment decisions or that your company used in their own financial reporting, that's criminal. She paused. Alex, you need to understand something. You're not just a witness anymore. You're the person who exposed this. David's going to blame you for destroying his career. The company might blame you for the liability exposure. Other employees might blame you for the investigation and potential layoffs. Whistleblowers don't usually get thanked. They get targeted. I felt cold. What should I do? Professor Navarro sighed. Document everything. Every threat. Every strange interaction. Every attempt to intimidate you. Keep your personal files backed up in multiple locations. Don't talk to anyone at the company without a witness. And seriously consider whether you want to stay there after this. I didn't want to leave. I needed the income. But she was right. Going back to that office was going to be impossible. The company said they'd provide representation if I get deposed. She laughed without humor. The company's lawyers represent the company's interests, not yours. Whatever you tell them gets reported back to management. You need your own lawyer if this goes to deposition or trial. I can represent you, but my fee is $300 an hour. I did quick math. I had maybe $2,000 in savings. Not enough. Professor Navarro must have heard me calculating. Whistleblower cases often include attorney fees as part of the settlement or judgment. I can work on contingency for the employment claims. If you have a retaliation case, we collect fees from the company when we win, but you need to file the complaint first. She explained the process. File with the State Labor Board alleging wrongful termination and retaliation. File with the EEOC if there were any discrimination elements. Document everything David did. Get statements from witnesses. Build the timeline. Monday morning, I want you to write down everything you remember about working for David. Every instruction to change numbers, every threat, every uncomfortable interaction, dates, times, witnesses. Email it to me by end of day. I agreed. Spent the entire weekend writing. By Sunday night, I had 15 pages of single-spaced incidents. Times David told me my calculations were wrong without explaining why. Meetings where he marked up my spreadsheets with different numbers. Emails where he said clients expect certain results and we need to deliver them. Comments about how I was too focused on accuracy instead of relationships. Warnings that I wouldn't last long if I couldn't learn to see the bigger picture. I sent it to Professor Navarro. She called me 20 minutes later. This is a prosecutor's dream. You documented his methodology in real time. Combined with the recording and Meridian's forensic accounting, this is airtight. Monday morning, I got called into another meeting. Just Gordon Shaw this time. He slid a document across the table. The company is prepared to offer you a severance package. 6 months salary, continued health insurance, and a neutral reference. In exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement about the events of last week and release all claims against the company and David Brennan. I looked at the number. 6 months salary was about $30,000, more money than I'd ever had at once. Gordon waited. This is a generous offer considering your limited tenure. It protects you from any retaliation and gives you financial security while you look for new opportunities. I thought about Professor Navarro's warning. Don't sign anything. I need to have my attorney review this. Gordon's expression hardened slightly. Your attorney? Alex, this is a straightforward severance agreement. Standard language. There's nothing predatory here. I stood up. Then my attorney will confirm that when she reviews it. I'll have an answer for you by end of week. Gordon's jaw tightened. The offer expires in 48 hours. After that, we'll need to consider other options for resolving your employment status. I met his eyes. My employment status is that I was constructively discharged for refusing to participate in fraud. Your 48-hour deadline doesn't change that. I walked out before he could respond. Professor Navarro laughed when I forwarded her the severance offer. 6 months salary and a gag order. They're trying to buy your silence cheap. With your documentation and Meridian's case, your wrongful termination claim is worth 10 times that. Maybe more if we can prove the company knew about David's fraud and enabled it. She sent me a formal response letter declining the offer. We're not negotiating with them. We're filing a complaint with the labor board today. Let them respond to that. The complaint was 25 pages, detailed every incident I'd documented, cited David's termination attempt as retaliation, named the company for creating a hostile work environment that forced employees to choose between keeping their jobs and committing fraud. Professor Navarro filed it electronically and sent me a copy. Now we wait. The labor board will investigate and the company will have to respond. They can't fire you or retaliate further without making your case stronger. I asked what would happen next. She explained that the labor board would interview witnesses, review documents, and make a determination about whether my rights were violated. If they find in your favor, they'll order remedies. Back pay, reinstatement, damages. If they don't, we can still sue in civil court. But the labor board gives us leverage. I felt relieved and terrified at the same time. The next day, 3 more analysts from David's team contacted me. They'd all worked on different client accounts. All had the same story. David telling them to revise their numbers, pressuring them to make projections more optimistic, warning them that clients don't pay for pessimism. One analyst, Kevin, had been there for 3 years. I thought I was bad at my job. David kept telling me my analysis was too conservative, that I didn't understand client relations. I almost quit twice because I felt incompetent. He showed me his phone. Dozens of emails from David criticizing his work, telling him to redo calculations, saying his projections would cost the company clients. Now I realize he was training me to commit fraud, making me think accuracy was the problem instead of his lies. I told them about Jennifer Cole and Meridian's lawsuit, about the labor board complaint. Kevin looked sick. If Meridian is suing, what about my clients? What happens when they realize their projections were all inflated? Another analyst, Diana, spoke up. We need to go to HR, all of us, show them this was company-wide, that David had a system and we were all forced to follow it. I called Professor Navarro. She thought it was a good idea. Strength in numbers. Multiple witnesses saying the same thing makes the pattern undeniable. We scheduled a meeting with Linda in HR for the next morning. All four of us. Linda looked overwhelmed when we walked in together. Kevin spoke first. He'd been there the longest and seemed the most angry. David Brennan trained his entire team to falsify client projections. We have emails, marked up spreadsheets, and recordings of meetings where he explicitly told us to change accurate numbers to more optimistic ones. We were told this was standard practice. We were told clients expect it. We were told we'd be fired if we didn't comply. He dropped a folder on Linda's desk. Here's 3 years of documentation. Diana added her folder. Then the third analyst. Then me. Linda stared at the pile. This is beyond my authority. I need to bring in legal. Gordon Shaw showed up 20 minutes later with the other 2 lawyers. They interviewed each of us separately, asked about specific incidents, specific clients, specific numbers. By the end of the day, they'd identified at least 15 client accounts where David had systematically inflated projections over multiple years. Gordon looked defeated. This is a company-ending event. If all these clients sue, if regulators get involved, if criminal charges are filed, the company might not survive. The CEO called an emergency board meeting. Gordon went upstairs to brief them. We waited in the conference room. Rachel brought coffee. You all just blew up the company. Kevin shook his head. David blew up the company. We just stopped lying about it. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. Gordon came back looking exhausted. The board has decided to hire an independent forensic accounting firm to audit all of David's accounts for the past 5 years. They're contacting every affected client to disclose the possibility of billing errors. They're cooperating fully with Meridian's lawsuit. And they're reporting the situation to the SEC and the State Attorney General. He looked at each of us. You're all being placed on paid administrative leave pending the investigation. This is not punishment. This is protection. We need to separate you from the normal workflow while we determine the scope of the fraud. You'll receive full salary and benefits. You're required to cooperate with investigators. And you're prohibited from discussing this matter with anyone except your lawyers or law enforcement. Kevin asked the question we were all thinking. What about David? Gordon's expression went cold. David has been terminated for cause. He's hired a criminal defense attorney. That should tell you where this is heading. I felt a wave of relief mixed with dread. David was out. But now he knew we'd all turned against him. Professor Navarro's warning echoed in my head. Whistleblowers get targeted. I got a Facebook message that night from a number I didn't recognize. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. I screenshotted it and sent it to Professor Navarro. She called immediately. That's harassment and witness intimidation. Forward it to Gordon Shaw and the police. File a report tonight. I went to the police station and explained the situation. The officer took my statement and the screenshot. Has he threatened you directly? I said not yet. Just the one message. The officer made a report but said there wasn't much they could do unless David made specific threats. Keep your phone. Document everything. If he shows up at your home or workplace, call 911 immediately. I drove home looking over my shoulder the whole way. My roommate was in the living room studying. I showed him the message. He got serious fast. Alex, David just lost his career because of you. In his mind, anyway. People get dangerous when they lose everything. He went to his room and came back with a baseball bat. Keep this by your door. I'm not trying to scare you, but be smart. I took the bat, checked all the locks. Barely slept that night. Every sound outside made me jump. The next morning, I found my car had been keyed. Long, deep scratches on both sides. Whistleblower carved into the hood. I called the police. Same officer came out, took photos. Any cameras in the parking lot? I checked with my landlord. No cameras. The officer sighed. Without proof, I can't connect this to David, but given the timing and the message, I'm filing it as harassment related to your case. Keep documenting. Professor Navarro filed for a restraining order that afternoon. Used the Facebook message and the car vandalism as evidence. The judge granted a temporary order. David had to stay 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. Couldn't contact me directly or through intermediaries. The order would be reviewed at a hearing in 2 weeks. Gordon Shaw called when he heard about the vandalism. The company is taking this seriously. We've hired security for all the analysts who came forward. Someone will monitor your apartment building overnight until this settles down. I felt slightly better knowing someone was watching. The security guard introduced himself that evening. Former cop named James. He'd park across the street and watch the building from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. You see anything suspicious? You call me directly. He gave me his cell number. Don't hesitate. Better to call for nothing than not call when it matters. That night I actually slept. Knowing James was outside helped. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. I couldn't work, couldn't talk about the case publicly. Just waited while the forensic accountants tore through. David's files and the lawyers built their cases. Jennifer Cole called with updates. Meridian's forensic accountant had finished their analysis. Total overbilling was actually $4.2 million over 5 years. That's just one client. If the pattern holds across all 15 accounts David managed, we're talking about $50 million in fraudulent billing. She paused. The FBI got involved this morning. Securities fraud this large triggers federal investigation. The restraining order hearing happened on a Friday morning. David showed up with his lawyer. He looked terrible. Lost weight, hadn't shaved, eyes red. His lawyer argued that David had sent one message in anger and hadn't contacted me since, that the car vandalism was unproven, that the restraining order was overly broad and punitive. Professor Navarro presented the Facebook message, photos of my car, the police reports, and testimony from James, the security guard, about suspicious vehicles he'd seen near my building. The judge wasn't impressed with David's lawyer. Your client contacted a witness in a federal fraud investigation with a message that could be interpreted as threatening, a witness who directly caused his termination. That's witness intimidation regardless of intent. The restraining order stands for 1 year. If your client violates it, he'll be arrested. David stared at me as we left the courtroom. Pure hatred. His lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him away. Outside, Professor Navarro looked satisfied. 1 year of protection. That takes us past the criminal trial if charges are filed. I asked if she thought charges would be filed. She nodded. The FBI doesn't investigate unless they think they can prosecute. With your documentation, the forensic accounting, and multiple witnesses, they have everything they need. The federal indictment came down 3 weeks later. David Brennan was charged with 23 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. He pleaded not guilty. His lawyer released a statement claiming David was a scapegoat for company-wide practices, that executives knew about his methodology and approved it, that he was being sacrificed to protect upper management. The company panicked. The CEO issued a statement denying any knowledge of David's fraud, said he operated independently with minimal oversight, that the company was a victim too. Gordon Shaw called me. David's defense strategy is to drag the company down with him. He's claiming everyone knew, that this was standard practice. We need your testimony that David specifically instructed you to hide his methodology from management. I remembered the meetings. David always said to keep our calculations between the team. Don't bother executives with technical details. Just show them the final projections. I told Gordon. He looked relieved. That's evidence of concealment. He knew what he was doing was wrong and actively hid it. The FBI wanted to interview me. 2 agents came to Professor Navarro's office. They were professional but intense, asked about every interaction with David, every instruction to change numbers, every warning about keeping things quiet. They showed me emails I'd forgotten about. David telling me not to copy executives on draft reports, saying they only care about final numbers, explaining that too much transparency creates confusion. The lead agent, Special Agent Williams, looked satisfied. He was running a deliberate fraud operation and actively concealing it. That's consciousness of guilt. They interviewed all 4 analysts who'd come forward, then started interviewing the clients. Each client had believed the projections because they came from a reputable company with proper credentials. Each had made business decisions based on those projections, hired staff, made investments, expanded operations, all based on lies. The first client lawsuit was filed by Meridian, then Foster Industries, then 3 more clients within a week. Each lawsuit alleged fraud, breach of contract, and negligent misrepresentation. Each demanded millions in damages. The company's stock price crashed, dropped 60% in 2 days. Trading was halted. The board fired the CEO and CFO, brought in crisis management. The new CEO called a company-wide meeting. Everyone crammed into the main conference room. He stood at the front, looking grim. I'm going to be direct. The company is facing existential threat from the lawsuits and the federal investigation. We're cooperating fully with law enforcement. We've implemented new oversight procedures, but the damage is severe. He paused. There will be layoffs. We're evaluating every position and every account. I can't promise everyone will have a job in 3 months. People started yelling questions. How many layoffs? Which departments? What about severance? The new CEO held up his hand. I don't have those answers yet. I'm being transparent about the situation. You deserve to know the truth. After the meeting, Rachel found me outside. They're going to blame us. The analysts who reported David. People are already saying we should have kept quiet, that we destroyed the company. I felt sick. We'd done the right thing. We'd stopped fraud. But to everyone losing their jobs, we were the problem. Kevin was more pragmatic. Let them blame us. We didn't create the fraud. We ended it. If the company collapses, it's because leadership enabled a criminal for 12 years. The trial was scheduled for 8 months out. Federal cases moved slowly. In the meantime, the SEC opened its own investigation into the company's financial reporting. If David's inflated projections made it into the company's public filings, that was securities fraud at the corporate level. The new CEO tried to cooperate, but the damage was done. 3 executives were placed on administrative leave. 2 resigned. The company's accounting firm withdrew their certification of previous year's financial statements. That triggered a cascade of problems. Credit lines got pulled. Vendors demanded cash payment. Clients canceled contracts. The company was hemorrhaging money and credibility. Professor Navarro filed a wrongful termination lawsuit on my behalf while we waited for the labor board decision. Named the company and David personally. Sought damages for lost wages, emotional distress, and reputational harm. We're going after everything. The company enabled David's fraud. They created an environment where employees had to choose between ethics and employment. That's liability. The company tried to settle. Offered $200,000 and a confidentiality agreement. Professor Navarro laughed. Counteroffer. $500,000, no confidentiality agreement, and a written admission that Alex was terminated for refusing to participate in fraud, plus attorney fees. Gordon Shaw looked pained. The company can't afford that. We're bleeding money from the other lawsuits. Professor Navarro shrugged. Then explain to a jury why you fired a junior analyst for catching fraud while you enabled the fraud for 12 years. See which story they believe. The company folded before the trial, filed for bankruptcy protection 6 months after David's indictment. All the civil lawsuits got wrapped into the bankruptcy proceedings. Creditors fighting over scraps. My wrongful termination case got priority as an employment claim. The bankruptcy trustee offered $150,000 as full settlement. Professor Navarro advised me to take it. The company's dead. This is all you're going to get. If you wait for trial, the money might be gone. I took the settlement. $150,000 minus attorney fees left me with about $100,000. More money than I'd ever seen. Enough to pay off my student loans and have a cushion while I looked for new work. But it felt hollow. The company was destroyed. Hundreds of people lost their jobs. David was facing decades in prison, and I was the analyst who'd corrected a number in a meeting. Rachel got a job at a competitor. Kevin moved to another state. Diana left accounting entirely. We'd all been marked as whistleblowers. Some companies saw that as integrity, others saw it as liability. I applied to 40 firms, got 3 interviews. 2 went well until they asked about my previous employer. When I explained what happened, both interviewers got uncomfortable. We appreciate your honesty, but we're looking for someone with less complicated history. The 3rd interviewer was different. Smaller firm. The owner, Margaret, listened to my whole story. So you caught fraud, reported it, and got fired? I nodded. She smiled. You're hired. I want someone who won't lie to clients or to me. That's worth more than experience. I started the following Monday. Junior analyst again, but the culture was completely different. Margaret ran a small ethical practice. 10 employees. No high-pressure sales. Just accurate analysis and honest reporting. David's trial started on a cold morning in November. Professor Navarro came with me to watch. The courthouse was downtown, big and intimidating. We went through security and found seats in the gallery. David sat at the defense table looking small. His lawyer presented the scapegoat defense. That David was following company protocols. That executives knew and approved his methods. That he was being prosecuted for standard industry practices. The prosecution destroyed him. Special Agent Williams testified about the investigation. The forensic accountants presented their analysis. Systematic inflation across all clients over 5 years. No deviation, no mistakes, just deliberate fraud. Then they called the witnesses. Catherine Wolfe from Meridian. She described the recording, played it in court. David's voice screaming at me. His comment about how I didn't understand how things work. The prosecutor asked what she took that to mean. That he knew the numbers were wrong and didn't care. That presenting false information was normal for him. Then they called me. I walked to the witness stand with my legs shaking. The prosecutor asked me to describe the meeting. I told the story again. The error I caught. David's explosion. His firing me. The prosecutor showed the recording transcript. Did you understand that David was ordering you to present information you knew was false? I nodded. He told me accuracy wasn't as important as client satisfaction. That projections should be optimistic even if the math didn't support it. The defense attorney cross-examined me. Tried to suggest I was a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. That I'd reported David to get him fired. That I was motivated by money from the settlement. Professor Navarro had prepared me for this. I stayed calm. I corrected an error in a client meeting. David fired me for it. The client was recording because they already suspected fraud. I didn't report David. Meridian did. The defense attorney pushed harder. But you collected $150,000 from your lawsuit. That's quite a payout for 7 months of work. I looked at the jury. I collected $150,000 because I was fired for refusing to lie to clients. The company admitted that in the settlement. This isn't about money. It's about David committing fraud for years and intimidating employees into helping him. The prosecutor stood up. Objection. Counsel is attacking the witness for being a victim of retaliation. The judge sustained it. Told the defense to move on. But the damage was done. The jury had heard David's defense. That I was just after money. After 2 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for 3 days. When they came back, the foreman stood. We find the defendant guilty on all counts. David's face went white. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. The judge thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks out. David was remanded to custody pending sentencing. Marshals led him away in handcuffs. He looked back at me one more time. I didn't look away. Sentencing day was packed. Victims filled the gallery. Catherine spoke about how Meridian had to lay off employees because of budget shortfalls from the fraudulent billing, how families lost income, how trust was destroyed. Other clients spoke. Each story was the same. Lies leading to bad decisions, leading to real harm. The prosecutor recommended 15 years. David's lawyer begged for mercy, said David had already lost everything, his career, his reputation, his freedom. The judge listened to everything. Then she spoke directly to David. You used your position of trust to defraud clients for years. You threatened and fired employees who tried to stop you. You showed no remorse until you were caught. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated scheme to enrich yourself at others' expense. She sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison. David slumped in his chair. The marshals led him away. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Catherine and me. She gave a statement about justice being served. A reporter asked me how I felt. I thought about everything that happened. The meeting, the recording, the investigation, the bankruptcy, the lives disrupted. I just corrected a number in a presentation. Everything after that was David's choice. He chose fraud. He chose intimidation. He chose to keep lying until he got caught. The system worked. That's all. Professor Navarro pulled me away before they could ask more questions. We walked to her car in silence. Finally, she spoke. You did good, Alex. A lot of people would have kept their heads down, adjusted the numbers, collected their paycheck. You didn't. I didn't feel heroic, just tired. It destroyed the company. All those people lost their jobs. She shook her head. David destroyed the company. The fraud destroyed it. You just exposed it before more people got hurt. I wanted to believe that. 2 years later, I'd rebuilt my career at Margaret's firm. She promoted me to senior analyst after a year. I worked on honest projects with ethical clients. Some days I didn't think about David at all. Other days, something would trigger a memory. A client meeting, a projection, a correction. But it didn't control me anymore. I'd given a deposition in one of the civil suits. A client had sued David personally for damages. Won a judgment for $2 million? David would never be able to pay it. He'd serve his 12 years and come out with nothing. No career, no money, no reputation. Just a federal conviction and destroyed life. Rachel called me one afternoon. She'd heard through former colleagues that the company's bankruptcy was finally resolved. Creditors got pennies on the dollar. The executives who'd resigned faced no charges. David was the only one who went to prison. Does that feel fair to you? She asked. I thought about it. Fair wasn't the right word. Justice was messy, incomplete. But David was locked up. The fraud stopped. Clients knew the truth. That had to be enough. It's what we got, I told her. Margaret knocked on my office door later that day. Got a new client, big account. They specifically requested you. She smiled. Said they heard about your reputation for accuracy and integrity. Apparently word gets around in this industry. I took the file, read through the background. A medium-sized company looking for honest financial analysis and planning. No inflation, no optimistic projections, just truth. I opened my laptop and started working. This was what accounting was supposed to be. Numbers that meant what they said, analysis you could trust, projections based on reality, not wishful thinking. No one screaming at me for catching errors. Just quiet professional work, building something real. I thought about the meeting that started everything. David's red face, his hand slamming the table, Catherine's phone recording it all. One moment that changed everything. I didn't regret correcting those numbers. I never would. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.